Okay, so we're going to start Unit 2. Okay, and that means that we'll be going over the biology part, okay, of Science 10 now. I was going to have us do a lab this week, but you guys don't have school on Friday. Lucky you. I still do. Okay, but you guys get a day off, which makes a nice long 4-day Thanksgiving weekend for you. See me turning green here? I'm like green with envy for you guys. Okay. Anyway, what we're going to go over then is we're going to go over the cell theory today. We'll talk a little bit about microscopy today and probably a bit tomorrow, and then a little bit about cells on Thursday, and then on Monday, or sorry, not on Monday, on Tuesday. Okay, we're going to go into the lab and use the microscopes and do our first microscopy lab then. All right, so we need to know the points of the cell theory. Okay, these first two units kind of start the same way, right? First one was the atomic theory. Now we got to talk about the cell theory because we need to talk about the basic unit of each science. The basic unit of chemistry and physics, for that matter, is the atom. All right, but the basic unit for biology is the cell. All right. So we got to talk about the cell theory, okay? And it's going to tie into basically everything in this unit in the same way that Dalton's atomic theory tied into everything in the last unit. All right? So we need to know who contributed to the development of the cell theory. There are a lot less people, okay, in this one than there were with the atomic theory, where we had to know, Dalton, and then, then we had the plum pudding, and then we had, we had a lot more people. We don't have to worry about as many people for this one, okay? And we need to recognize what the similarities between plant and animal cells imply. Okay, what does that mean? Why are their cells so similar when on the surface we in a plant don't seem to have very much in common? All right? Well, believe it or not, you have a lot in common with plants. Okay? Many of your basic cellular processes are identical. Okay? Of course, there is one major difference, and that is how you acquire food energy. Okay, they can go out in the sun and not be hungry. All right, whereas you or I actually have to eat. It would be great if you were starving and you just walked out into the sun and went, not hungry anymore. Okay, but we can't do that. All right, it just doesn't work that way. We're not photosynthetic. All right, so we're looking at this cell here. Okay, what kind of cell is this? Plant or animal? Plants. Okay, here's how we can tell. Okay, some subtle differences between a plant and animal cell. Presence of a cell wall, first off. All right, cell wall makes the cells very rigid. Okay, and makes them have a very specific shape. Yeah, they're somewhat flexible, but not like an animal cell. Okay, if all of your cells had cell walls, you wouldn't be able to move. Okay, because your cells would all be rigid, and you'd be like, lurch, okay, like it'd be hard for you to walk around, okay? So it's not going to work for us. Our cells do not have cell walls. They only have a cell membrane, which makes them very pliable. They can twist and change shape and do all kinds of things to allow us to move, okay? The other thing is these green things. We don't have any green things in our cells because, again, we're not photosynthetic. These are chloroplasts, and they are the photosynthetic organ of the plant cell, the thing that allows plants to make food for themselves using carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight, all right? Everyone follow me there? All right. Now, on the plus side of this, plants depend on us as much as we depend on them because their raw materials are carbon dioxide and water. Yeah, they need sunlight. We can't make that for them, but that's always around. Okay. We make carbon dioxide and water all the time. Agreed? When you exhale, what's in that? Carbon dioxide and water, okay? On a cold day, I know it hasn't been cold enough to see your breath a lot yet lately, okay? But it will be soon, okay? You can see your breath because there's water vapor in there, all right? So we're providing some of the important raw materials for them, and plants in turn provide important raw materials for us, okay? It's called the carbon cycle, okay? And it's very, very important. All right, cell theory, okay? The points of the cell theory. All organisms are made up of cells. Okay, some are unicellular and others are multicellular. All right, now, in order to be a living thing, what are some things a living thing should show us? Or what's some characteristics a living thing should have? Called what? Niger. Oh, Nigeria. Okay. Niger. Okay, Niger. Okay, yeah. I've never heard that. Okay, tell me what they all stand for. Oh, you don't know? Okay, you just remember the acronym. Well, that's not very useful. Okay, well, let's try and brainstorm. What are some things a living organism should be able to do? They would, what? Nourishment. Okay, yes, they got to be able to acquire energy in some way. They should be able to reproduce. They should be able to grow. Produce wastes. What's that? Use energy. Yeah, we had that one. Yeah, acquire nourishment, energy. Yeah. All right, so it's got to be able to do those things. All right, so fire is alive. Fire consumes energy. Fire produces waste. Fire reproduces. Why isn't fire alive? Well, a plant doesn't have a central nervous system either. A sponge doesn't have a central nervous system. Okay? A starfish doesn't have a central nervous system. It's radial, right? So fire's not a gas. Right now, I'm saying fire's alive. Your definition of a living organism says fire's alive. You ever seen fire reproduce? Fire reproduces. Okay, spark from one fire goes over to another place, new fire. I kind of call that reproduction. Okay, it's got to be made up of cells. Fire is a chemical reaction. Okay, but if we forget about this most important point of the cell theory, all organisms are made up of cells. Fire would be a living organism. All right, this is the thing that says you've got to have this in order to be considered alive. Now, there is one organism, okay, that does not fit this bill. What is it? A virus. Okay, there's a lot of debate as to whether a virus is actually a living organism, because a virus does not use energy. Okay, it has no structures within it that can process or metabolize energy in any way. It does not produce any waste. All right, but it can reproduce. Then it can reproduce very, very quickly. However, it cannot reproduce on its own. Okay? It uses your cells to reproduce. So it doesn't actually actively reproduce. It causes your cell to produce copies of it. Right? How many of you've all had this experience, right? You go to bed at night and you got that little tickle in your throat, and you're like, oh man, I think I'm getting sick. But you just go to bed, right? You don't do the smart thing, which is like take 5 cold effects and, well, you shouldn't take that many, but okay, drink a 2-liter thing of orange juice and eat 4 cans of chicken noodle soup and then go to sleep. Okay? Obviously, you wouldn't do that, but you should do something other than just go to sleep, because when you just go to sleep, you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh my God, I would have to get better to die. Okay? That's how bad you feel, right? Like, it's just awful. Your throat is swollen, you're congested, you just feel like death warmed over. All right? So, how does that happen? Well, it happens because viruses can reproduce very quickly using your cells. So that little tickle that you had in your throat, okay, was the first signs that a virus, or, well, at least one virus anyway, had taken over a cell in your body. Okay? And what it does is it gets inside your cell, and then its little tiny strand of DNA, and I'm talking tiny, there's not much to it, okay, goes into the nucleus of your cell where your DNA is stored. And it splices itself in, okay, and makes your cell think that this little section of DNA that actually tells your cell how to make a virus instead of how to make something useful, okay, is part of your own DNA. Your cell comes along and it says, oh yeah, we need to make, I don't know, insulin, or we need to make, some protein or something like that. And it goes to the part of the DNA where that's supposed to be, and instead of finding the instructions for that, it finds the instructions for making a virus. Your cell doesn't know the difference. It just knows where that stuff's supposed to be. Okay? It would be like a blind librarian. All right? It's like, I know where that book is supposed to be, and if somebody switched the books, they would grab the book and they would give you the wrong book. Okay? That's essentially how your cell would work. Okay? It goes into the nucleus and it takes the piece of DNA it's supposed to make, all right? And it says to the cell, make that stuff. So the cell goes and it makes a virus. And then the nucleus is like, what's going on? I told you to make insulin. Where's the insulin? Make it again. So what does it do? makes another virus. Keeps taking the wrong book, keeps taking the wrong book, keeps making more and more viruses. Pretty soon the cell fills up with viruses until it bursts. Okay? Now that one virus that got into that one cell has copied itself over 1,000 times. 1 to 1,000. Okay? Can a virus reproduce quickly? Yeah, now imagine each one of those 1,000 viruses goes out and infects another cell. Okay? Now let's say that only half of them are successful. That's still pretty bad. Okay? Because now you got 500,000 viruses, okay, hanging around. And that's only 2 generations. Okay? And a generation doesn't take more than a couple of hours. All right? For a virus. Okay? You guys following me here? All right? And viruses are tiny. In order to attack a virus and kill it, your body can't just go around in the bloodstream looking for individual viruses. It has to kill your own cells to do it. Okay? It sees a cell that's got a virus attached to it. It knows the cell isn't functioning. It kills the cell. Because it knows by killing that cell, it kills all the viruses that are inside. Okay? That's a faster way to get rid of the virus. Because a virus can't live on its own. Okay? It can only live when inside of a cell. So outside of a cell, a virus has a very short life expectancy. Okay? So when you see all these advertisements like on Clorox and Lysol wipes and things like that, they're like kills 99% of flu viruses and whatever. It's like the flu virus would die outside of the human body in minutes anyway. Okay? You know what else kills viruses? Time. Okay? And not very much of it. All right? You don't generally have to worry about catching a virus off of a table or a phone or something like that unless you use it immediately after someone who's coughed all over it. Okay? But do you have to worry about shaking somebody's hand? Yeah, you do. There's living cells there. If they cough onto their hand, that's why you're supposed to cough this way, right, into your sleeve. Okay? They cough cells onto their hand, cells that contain viruses along with mucus and other gross stuff. Okay? So then you're like, hey, no, don't do that. Okay? And during flu season, when we give the sign of peace in the morning, it's okay to do that. Okay? Just give them a pound, because that'll be safer. All right? Think about that. It's actually, believe it or not, safer to hug a person than to shake their hand. In terms of, yeah. Okay? It's actually even safer to give them a kiss on the cheek as opposed to a shake of the hand. Okay? Because your hands are always touching stuff. I mean, that's what we use them for, right? They're to manipulate things. They're always touching germy surfaces. Okay? You should always wash your hands. Am I making you a germaphobe yet? I will. Okay? All right. So, all living organisms are made up of cells. Some of them are multicellular, like a cactus. Okay? Some of them are single-celled, like a paramecium. Okay? Or these little things, okay, that live in the ocean, they're called actinopods. Okay? And actinopods are like an amoeba, except they have this glass shell around them. Okay? And they feed by sticking parts of their cytoplasm outside the cell, and stuff sticks to it, and then they bring it back in and eat it. Okay? All right. Second and third points of the cell theory. Cells carry out the basic functions of an organism. So a cell should be able to take care of itself if provided with the raw materials it needs. So if I take one of your cells out of your body and put it on a petri dish, okay, with nutrients, it should survive. Okay? In fact, it should even be able to reproduce a little bit. Okay? Because a cell can carry out the basic functions of an organism. All right? Everyone follow me there? Don't think that if you do that, you're going to clone yourself. If you take a skin cell, all you're going to get are skin cells. Okay? Everyone follow me on that? It doesn't work perfectly like that, obviously. Okay? Theoretically, that's how it should work. And the third point, new cells are not created. They come from the division of existing cells. Every cell in your body that makes you up right now came from one cell. Okay, 15, 16 years ago when sperm met egg, okay, it made a single cell called the zygote. Okay, that zygote contained all the information necessary to make you. Okay, and every cell that is in your body now is a descendant of that single cell. All right, everyone follow me there? Okay, that is actually the scientific reasoning behind why the church feels abortion is wrong. Okay? That very first cell has everything necessary to make you. Okay? It is our feeling that at that point, it is you. Okay? And no matter what happens after that, okay, the destruction of anything after that point is the killing of a living organism. Yeah, that's the scientific backing, just to let you know, okay, behind what you're learning in religion class. All right, so that cell divides over and over and over again. Okay, now there's lots of different kind of embryonic stages that you'll learn more about in Bio 30. Okay, but okay, eventually cells start to specialize. Okay, things like that, and those cells can become liver, and these cells will become muscles, and these cells will become your brain and spinal cord. These ones will become your bones. Okay, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, those cells that become things are called. They're a special kind of cell that some people want to harvest. Stem cells. Okay, if you've heard about stem cells and stem cell research, okay, there are different kinds of stem cells. Embryonic stem cells are the kind that are best for stem cell use. Okay, because if I take out the cells that are destined to be a liver and I put them in a growth medium, I'll grow liver tissue. Okay, those cells will grow into liver tissue. I do the same thing with the cells that were going to become nerves. I can grow nerve tissue. Okay, that nerve tissue can be grafted across broken spinal cords. Okay, and allow people to regain partial use. Okay, of limbs and things like that after paralysis. Okay, I actually saw in university they did this with rats. They severed their spinal cords and paralyzed them, and then grafted stem cell grown nerve cells across the gap, and they were actually able to regain significant percentages of their original movement. All right, it's got lots of potential, but where do the cells come from? From an embryo. Okay, if you take the cell from an embryo that was going to become its liver, what did you do to it? You killed it. Okay, embryonic stem cells come at the cost of an embryo. Okay, that's their drawback, major drawback. Okay. The other kind of stem cells are the kind you can take from your own body. Those are called pluripotent stem cells. They work okay, but not nearly as good as embryonic stem cells do. Okay, they can't necessarily be grown into anything. But they work okay. All right, so all cells come from the division of existing cells. Okay, blood cells still come from the division of other cells, within your bone marrow. Okay, your bone marrow has special, essentially kind of stem cells, within the bone marrow, pluripotent ones that can produce more red blood cells, white blood cells, things like that. Okay, that's why if you get leukemia, you usually need a bone marrow transplant to help you with that, because your bone marrow is now overproducing white blood cells, and that's what leads to leukemia. All right, is that making sense? Yes? Okay. So those are the 3 points of the cell theory. All very important. All organisms are made up of cells. Okay? Cell carries out basic functions of an organism. Cells are not created. They come from the division of existing cells. Okay, development of the cell theory. Important people. First important person was a guy named Hooke. Oddly enough, Hooke was not a biologist. Hooke is better known for his work in physics. Okay, when you take Physics 20, we'll talk about Hooke's law. Okay, he studied springs and lenses and things like that. Well, his experiment with lenses had a great unintended side effect. He built this microscope. Okay, he put a series of lenses together and bent the light and allowed it in such a way that it bent, and then when it came out of the lenses, it did this, crossed over, and enlarged the image he was looking at. Okay, that's how lenses work, by the way. Okay, they bend light, they change the path of the light, and when they change the path of light, they can make things bigger or smaller. Okay, so he did that, and then he decided, well, I'm going to look at stuff. I just made this thing that magnifies stuff. I'm going to look at little stuff. Okay, so he put this piece of cork that he'd sliced really, really thin, underneath his microscope, and this is what he saw. Okay, where does cork come from? Yeah, it comes from a tree. Okay, so what are all these little things? These are cells. Okay, each and every one of these little spaces is a cell. It's actually not a living cell, because the cork that you would get from a bottle, from a wine bottle or something like that, is actually dead. All right, so what he was looking at was actually the cell walls. Everything else was gone because the cells were dead. This is why he called them cells. He thought they looked like empty rooms, like a prison cell, or the cells in a monastery or whatever. Okay, empty little rooms. Okay, that's why he called them cells. That's where the name comes from. So this guy, who was actually a physics person, discovered cells. Possibly one of the most important discoveries of all time, and like most important discoveries, completely by accident. Okay. So his microscope wasn't all that good. It doesn't magnify much more than a good magnifying glass would in this day. Okay, but 30 times was enough for him to see the large plant cells contained within a piece of cork. All right. When that was discovered, people that tried to better this microscope, tried to make better ones, look at different things. Okay, so this guy came along. He would be kind of the first real cellular biologist, Anton von Leeuwenhoek. Okay, Leeuwenhoek built this microscope that you see him holding there. Luckily, it didn't catch on because it would be very difficult to use. All right, he had a lens here. The object sat on top of this little triangular thing here. Okay, and it had kind of a, if it was enlarged, it would look like this. It would kind of a concave basin at the top here, so he could put fluid in there. All right, and then he would put it up to the light, and the light would pass through the specimen and then through the lens. Okay, that was kind of here, and as it passed through the lens, okay, the image would get bigger, and then he could project it onto a screen. All right, or he could hold it a long ways away and look through like this. All right, either way, he could look at much larger things. Okay, 300x. Right, it was pretty good, but very difficult to use. Not the way you focus it was to kind of move further or away or whatever like that. Right, it wasn't a great thing to use. All right, especially if you needed to move farther away than the length of your arm. Okay, then it would become difficult. All right, but he looked at living cells. Okay. Hooke only looked at cells that were dead. Okay? Anton von Leeuwenhoek looked at cells while they were alive, and he was able to discover a lot of interesting things about what cells do and where cells are. And he found that cells were basically everywhere. All right? He looked at pond water, he pricked his finger and looked at blood cells. He got sperm cells from cattle somehow. As far as I know, cows are girls. Bulls, on the other hand, I don't know how he got sperm from them. That would be dangerous, I would think. But okay. So anyway, he looked at that. So he would have seen the little, sperm that had the waggly tail, and that would have been pretty cool to actually see under a microscope because they move around pretty fast. Okay. So he looked at lots of living cells, which is a big step. Okay, big step to see single-celled organisms carrying out their business. All right. In 1839, cells were acknowledged as the units of life by these two guys, Matthias Schleiden and Theodor Schwann, two Swedish scientists, okay, whose idea was this. They generated this hypothesis. If cells are the basic unit of life, and organisms from all branches of the tree of life, they probably didn't say it that way, but it's something like that, okay, are viewed under a microscope, then it will be found that all organisms contain cells. Okay? They worked on this for years. This was like a lifetime project for them. They looked at fungus, they looked at bacteria, they looked at animals, plants, and everything they looked at that was alive, without exception, contained cells. Okay? And many different kinds of cells. All right? So that was their idea. They were the ones who proposed the original cell theory. Okay, so Schleiden and Schwann were the two guys that proposed the cell theory because they had their hypothesis and it was proven time and time again. That's how something becomes a theory, by the way. Okay, a hypothesis and a theory are different. A lot of people think they're the same thing, but they are not. Okay, a hypothesis, right, can be right or wrong. Okay, a theory is what you get when your hypothesis has been proven time and time again, even with variations made upon it. It is always found to be true. Okay? Then it can become a theory, all right? Or a law, okay, as the case may be. All right, questions on that? Okay. Now, as our technology got better, okay, we were able to look at cells in more and more detail. And that's when we were starting to find out, not just does everything have cells, but cells are similar no matter what we look at. All right? If I look at the cells of a plant, a fungus, okay, an animal, their cells look the same. Or at least similar, not exactly the same, but similar. They have a lot of shared structures. Right? For example, our cells, plant cells, fungus cells, okay, even an amoeba, which is a protist, okay, they all have a nucleus, Okay, they all have cytoplasm, they all have a cell membrane, there's a lot of structures in common. And how they do things is very similar as well. All right? How they transport materials is similar. How they make proteins is similar. Okay? In fact, not just similar, essentially exactly the same. How is it that organisms that could be so different on the surface can be so similar at their most basic level? Okay? The idea here is that all organisms on Earth evolved from a common ancestor. Okay? The first living things on Earth to have cells would have done things very much like your cells do them today. Okay? They would have had similar structures. They would have had similar metabolic processes. Okay? Those things stick around because they work. Okay? The way natural selection and evolution work is if something works, it generally sticks around. If something better comes along, okay, that works more efficiently or does something better, then generally it appears more often, and the thing that doesn't work quite as well becomes less common until essentially it just disappears. Right? Evolution doesn't go this suddenly turned into that. Okay? It doesn't work that way. It's a slow process of gradual change and elimination and kind of things like that. All right, so all plant cells have similarities. Okay, all vertebrate animal cells have similarities, and again, vertebrate animal cells and plant cells also have similarities. Okay, especially in cells that do similar jobs, like act as supportive kind of things. All right, so if we're looking here, this is bone matrix, okay, from an animal, and this is the cells inside of the stalk of a plant. Right? Now, we see kind of a similar pattern here, dense in the middle, okay, kind of less dense towards the outside. All right? We see that there's room for fluids and nutrients and stuff to flow between the cells. Obviously, blood vessels kind of do that in an animal, right? Things like that. There's similarities in the way these cells are laid out, okay, not just in the cells themselves. So plant cell and animal cell side by side. All right? Let's just mark off the things that are the same here. So there's something that's the same, that little purple dot in the middle, okay, called the nucleolus. Okay, nucleus, same. All right, these sausage-shaped things called mitochondria, same. Okay, this blue stuff called endoplasmic reticulum is the same. Smooth endoplasmic reticulum, same. Okay, cytoplasm, same. Okay, the Golgi apparatus, same. Are we seeing a lot of similarities here? And that's just in structure. We haven't even talked about the processes yet. Okay? There's way too much in common for that to be by accident. Right? There's no way that two organisms that are not related would evolve so many things in common. Okay? It is highly likely that they came from the same place and diverged. Right? That would be the much more likely scenario. Okay? Divergent evolution is much more common than convergent evolution. Okay? All right, so lots of similarities. Some differences? Certainly. Okay, animals have to digest food. Plants don't. So animals have little organelles called lysosomes to help them do that. Okay, whereas plants have chloroplasts that help make their food. Okay. The end result, though, after they've made food, either they've eaten it as an animal or produced it by photosynthesis as a plant, that food goes to these things. Okay, called mitochondria. Whoops, sorry, that's not a mitochondria. Mitochondria burn sugar. Okay, they burn sugar, and as a result, they produce carbon dioxide and water. Okay, plants burn a lot of the sugar that they produce for energy. Okay, in exactly the same way that we do. All right, sugar is the fuel for all living organisms, including plants. The difference is plants can produce it themselves. Animals have to consume it, okay, from eating plants or other animals. All right? So basically, after that, a lot of the processes are the same. Okay? How they make proteins is the same. How they get rid of waste is the same. Okay? All of that stuff is the same. All right? So yes, certainly the way they get food changes how the cell looks. Okay? Changes some of the processes, but after that, essentially everything's the same. Right? Way too similar for that to have been by accident or to be coincidence. All right? So in this way, we are able to actually trace the similarities in our cells back to ancestral organisms that are now extinct, especially now that we have the ability to do what's called micropaleontology, which is actually look at microscopic fossils, okay, and see the similarities there. All right, we'll leave it there, and we'll start talking about microscopy tomorrow. We'll bring in microscopes and have a look at those.